Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Bensalem Township Council meeting. Today is June 22nd, the second day of summer, and it was a summery day for sure. I'd like to introduce you to all of our participants, and I'm going to start with the top left. We have Mayor Joseph DiGirolamo. Can you hear me, Mr. Mayor?
I do, Ed. Yes.
Okay, we have the mayor. I'm right in the middle there. I'm Ed Kisselback, President of Council. We have Joe Knowles, he's the Secretary of Council. We have to the second row, middle left, Joe Pizzo, our solicitor. And we have, my goodness, how do I do that? I know Russell is in the middle. Russ Benner, our engineer. Debbie McBreen, our township, clerk of council tonight. We have Joe Plary, the bottom left, Vice President of Council. We have council members. We have Jesse Sloan. And then we have Ed Tokmadian on the bottom right-hand side. And that's our council members and those who are in attendance today. Also, Darren Miller is here. He's our audio specialist, and our IT specialist will be Kurt Stolzenberger. Quentin Neon, our township building and planning specialist, of course, is on hold. If we need him, we can refer to him also. So he's also present this evening, although not on your screen. Okay, at this time, I'd like to begin the meeting by asking everyone to please rise for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Pizzo, are there any deletions from the agenda at this time?
No, there are not, Mr. Kisselback.
Okay, and as we know, we're going to have the public comments, and I'm going to read the information that went out. Public comments or questions on both agenda and non-agenda items can be mailed to the Bensalem Clerk of Council, or they can be emailed to publiccomments@bensalempa.gov. That's publiccomments BENSALEMPA.gov. And we'll be taking them throughout the entire evening as things progress. At this time, we'd like to move on to agenda item number 3, which is going to be approval of the council minutes. That's for May 26, 2020. Gentlemen, having the opportunity to review them, are there any comments, any changes?
I don't have any corrections on the meeting minutes. And we can address this at the end of the meeting, but I was just hoping to get an update on the issues that were brought up during the public comment portion last meeting that we said would be looked into further. So we can hold that to the end, but I just kind of wanted to raise that issue now.
So there are no changes, is that correct? I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
So moved.
I'll second.
Motion. Joe Plary, who seconded it?
I'll second it, Mr. Kisselback.
Ed Tokmadian seconded. Any additional discussion? Not hearing any. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
And against, the abstentions, that's unanimous. And later on, we can discuss whatever you'd like to discuss in the minutes, Jesse.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to agenda item number 4, consideration and public hearing on the community development COVID-19 funds. And I'll ask Mr. Pizzo to explain this, if you'd be kind enough, Joe.
Certainly, Mr. President. This may look familiar to the members of council in that it mirrors in many respects the approval that the administration asks you to give for the expenditure and budgeting of community development block grant monies that we get from the Department of Housing and Urban Development for our annual CDBG program here in the township. This list, however, is a list of CDGB monies that are specifically designated and originate out of the CARES program, the monies that were allotted by Congress in response to the COVID crisis in which we still find ourselves. So the CARES program has allotted certain CDGB monies that are eligible and to be used specifically by entities within the township, eligible entities within the township, specifically to address COVID-related matters. In this case, the list, as you'll see, there are four proposed uses of the funds. The Bensalem Senior Center for meal distribution and food preparation, which is a program that the Senior Center is currently engaged in. Monies for various food banks in Bensalem to distribute food to low and moderate income households who find themselves in need as a result of the COVID crisis. The homeless prevention pool of money is there for rental assistance to be administered through the County Board of Social Services. These monies primarily we're finding will be for individuals who at the outset of the crisis the government provided for the forbearance of rent in certain cases that are being paid to landlords, but forbearance is not forgiveness, and we're now coming to the point in time where the back rents are becoming due, and because of the circumstances being what they are, some of these tenants don't have all of the monies, and so this program is there to help assist them through that time. And then finally, money for the Bucks County Emergency Shelter over in Levittown, which is also a regular recipient of Township CDGB funds as well. So this list is something that the administration has done and come up with in cooperation with county social services, particularly the County Opportunity Council. The county is largely the one that has been sort of quarterbacking these monies that we're receiving, as well as the county's CDGB appropriations. And so it's being recommended that this statement of objectives and this projected use of the funds be given your approval this evening.
Can you elaborate on the fact that there's no administrative cost?
Typically, you would see for the township's normal CDGB allotment that we get at the beginning of the year. Included in those are the township's administrative funds, or at least a portion of the monies go to the township's administrative costs for the various programs that the township operates under the CDGB program. In this case, as I said, most of these programs are being administered and quarterbacked, if you will, through the county, and therefore, the program doesn't provide for the payment of the administrative fees, but secondly, the township's administrative fees are relatively small in this case because of the county being the lead agency on all of these projects.
This is not
Thank
a
you.
HUD program. It goes through the federal government, but it's a special program just for the COVID. So this is, as Mr. Pizzo said, this is mostly run by the county, and it comes to us. So we get nothing out of it. We do the distribution.
Okay, are there any questions regarding this?
I have a
Fine.
couple questions, Mr. Pizzo. Thanks for that summary. My first question is, you mentioned the CBGD funds. So are we still expected to get additional funds for the CBGD, or is this going to replace it essentially?
No, these, as the mayor just stated, this is at least for the moment, a one-time allotment of monies that was appropriated and designated through the federal government through the CARES program.
All right, so in addition, basically, then, to our normal CBGD funds?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Correct.
All right, and then the second question I have is the projected use of funds, which I'm supportive of completely. who manages, particularly the three at the senior center, the food banks, and the homeless prevention? Who's managing that at the township level?
We do that here, and Bill Samori will be the guy that would deliver those forms.
So, Mayor, is there an application online that residents can go to?
Well, most of it is going to be done through organizations, as you can see, the homeless shelter, the food banks. We won't deal with individuals,
Okay.
but we'll deal with the senior center, as you see, the food banks, the emergency shelter operation. So it all goes to organizations.
Okay. Yeah, I guess my question was particularly geared towards the homeless prevention, with Mr. Pizzo mentioning the subsidy to cover rents, but that's fine too as well. Okay. No, thank you.
Are there any other questions, comments? If not, I entertain a motion.
I'll put the motion up that we accept and approve the Community Development COVID-19 funds.
We have a motion on the floor.
Second.
We have a second on the motion. Who was that?
I think Joe Clary had.
Joe
You can
Polari,
give
was
it
that
to
you?
Joe
All right,
Knowles
second
can
on the
have it.
motion, Mr. Polari. Any additional discussion? Not hearing any. All those in favor signify with an aye. Aye.
Vote aye.
Aye.
Against? Any abstentions? I hear that as being unanimous. The audio's not as good today. It's tough to hear something. Okay, agenda item number 5 is a consideration of public hearing on an ordinance. This is amending Chapter 225, Vehicles and Traffic, Article 2, Traffic Signals at Section 225-4, indicating the added language, no trucks, residential delivery only. This is at Essington Way at the entrance of Richelieu Road and Deborah Drive, also at the entrance of Richelieu Road. Okay, gentlemen, I don't think it needs explanation, but if you have any questions, please bring them forward.
My only question is that it seems like this has been an ongoing problem for a number of years, and I'm curious as to why it's only now coming in front of, the township for recommendation.
I think we have,
I
there a
can tell
letter?
you. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
I was going to say that when I went out there personally and looked at this, and it is a very bad, if you know where it cuts through there, a lot of trucks were using it to get to Street Road. So, Jesse, I don't have an honest answer to give you, other than when it came to my attention, I went out there immediately and gave it to everybody when I had to complain.
Okay.
And I would add to that, Jesse, that two exacerbating factors are, of course, a greater and greater proliferation of GPS usage, which is unfortunately designating these roads as a way to get from US 1 to Street Road. And secondly, the interchange work that started at the Turnpike US 1 Street Road interchange. We found that more and more cars are trying to use that route to bypass the work that's been going on there. So it's been an issue, but it hasn't been quite the issue it's become since the Route 1 work began.
Good. And, in addition to the signs, are we going to have some increased enforcement in that area so that all the motorists understand that there's a new law in that area?
Well, hopefully that's the reason we're putting up the signs, because I'm thinking the beginning, after we put them up, I think we're going to have some offenders.
Okay.
At the very beginning, absolutely.
Great. Yeah, I want to make sure that we're providing some ease to those residents back there.
Gentlemen, your pleasure.
I'll make a motion that we approve as presented.
I'll
All
second
right,
it.
we have a motion on the floor. We have a second on the motion. Goes to Sloan and Tokmajian. There are no emails that came in on this, Mr. Pizzo, for public comment. Is that correct?
That is correct. There's no public comment.
All right, so there is no public comment tonight on this ordinance. We have a motion on the floor. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Any against, any abstentions? That is unanimous. Okay, agenda item number 6, which is the Echo Beach. I'm thinking of you, Joe Polari. Okay, Echo Bensalem LLC. This is a final amended land development plan. 2721 Street Road. This is the Giant Shopping Center, and this is for 4 gasoline dispensing pumps. It says that the zoning classification is HC1 Highway Commercial. Is that correct, Mr. Pizzo?
That is correct.
Okay. And the tax map parcel is 2-37-60, 60.
No, I apologize. Mr. Benner may want to chime in, but I believe it's GC.
I think it is too, but. Russ, where are you?
Yeah, you're correct, yeah, it's GC, Joe.
Okay, I thought that may be the case, but when Joe Pizzo speaks, I listen.
Mr. Kisselback, I've admitted counsel for the applicant, Greg Edelman, into the Zoom. So you'll see him up there at the bottom of the
Greg?
screen.
Good evening.
Good evening, Greg. Do you have witnesses that we should admit into the hearing as well?
Yes, I do. I have 4 gentlemen, Mr. Drew Gorman, Joseph Lacagnina, Brian Myers, and Frank Tavani.
And they're, in what capacity, what is their title or interest in this project?
Sure. Mr. Gorman is a representative of the principal of Echo Bensalem LLC. Mr. Lacagnina is a representative of Giant. Mr. Myers is our project engineer, and Mr. Tavani is our project traffic engineer.
Okay. Now, Mr. Edelman, before we go any further, we're going to ask everyone to just pause for a second. The audio that Mr. Kisselback and I are dealing with here in the council room is not quite as loud as it's been for past meetings, and I don't know if that's something that, Darren, you're able to take care of for us without us getting feedback into the system, but we're having a hard time hearing some of the folk. And while he's checking on that, Mr. Edelman, are all your witnesses on screen?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Yeah, our audio version is low and muffled, so it is somewhat difficult to hear what everyone's saying.
Yeah, we were doing all right, but now it's...
Okay, try it.
Okay. Greg, would you just to say a few words so we can hear your volume?
Sure. Can you hear me? Testing.
That's much better. Mayor, could you say a few words for us?
Yes, how's everybody?
Great.
Much better.
That's great, thank you. Okay.
It's amazing when you have professionals in the building, right? Jeez.
Come in handy.
Okay, much different, and we can hear you. We could wing by the other stuff because we know who was participating. Okay, what we're going to do is, we know why you're here. You're asking for the pumps, the 4 pumps, to be at the fueling station at the Giant. We've
Correct.
seen you before. You have an amended plan, a final amended plan in front of us. And so, let me allow you to make a short presentation, Greg, and
Sure.
And we'll go through our review letter from T&M.
Great. Thank you, Ed, and I appreciate it. And good evening. It's nice to see everyone. We're here this evening, as you had just stated, for an amended final land development approval for the existing Giant Shopping Center to construct 4 fuel dispensing facilities in the parking lot, which is actually 8 pumps. They're side by side. In addition to that, as part of this amended land development is to construct an interconnect between the 2 shopping centers, which we feel is a very valuable addition to prevent additional traffic from going on to Street Road and then coming back into the centers. It actually increases pass-by traffic and decreases the overall traffic on Street Road for people who want to utilize tenants and stores in both shopping centers. And I think, Joe, if you can pull up the traffic flow exhibit, that's probably the best plan to look at.
1 second.
Sure.
How's that? Is that it?
That's the plan, but it hasn't loaded yet.
Okay.
I don't know if you have to click on it again. You want to see if maybe if it's down in your Adobe Acrobat down there at the bottom next to the Zoom app. It may have already opened.
And why
Any
is
luck, Joe?
You want me to zoom on it?
I don't actually see it.
I don't see it. Nobody sees it.
No one sees
Ha-
it?
No.
Now, has it opened on your screen already?
Do you have it on the
Sometimes there-
screen, Paizo?
Sometimes there's just some latency.
And while we're doing the technical
There it
aspect of that,
Right.
this is the Giant Shopping Center on Street Road and Mechanicsville Road. It's a 68,000 square foot giant supermarket. And they're looking for 4 pumps and 8 fueling stations. And they were before us on several occasions. The last time they were before the Bensalem Township Planning Commission was on May 15th.
Right, and we had obtained some variances recently for the use as well as the reduction of parking, but Mr. Paizo has put up the exhibit that shows the fuel dispensing facilities in brown and dark gray in the lower left-hand corner of the overall parking lot. That's the location of existing parking and asphalt, so we're not increasing impervious, we're just repurposing it. In addition, this plan shows the interconnect located between the 2 shopping centers. And Joe, if you can scroll down just a little bit. You'll see the interconnect there again in the same type of gray shading with additional striping that has been reviewed by Russ and his engineering firm in order to make sure we have the proper pedestrian crossing as well as stop controls throughout the center to maintain pedestrian crossing safety, given that pedestrians will be walking back and forth from the parking lots. So overall, yeah, that's good. That's a good blow up. That shows the Giant to your right. The Giant Food is the building to your right, and the proposed gas dispensing facilities is to your left. And there you can see all of the new striping as well as additional stop controls in order to make sure that we've got some safe pedestrian crossing areas as well as an extension of the sidewalk that runs down to that angled crosswalk so that there will be also a place for all pedestrians to safely walk outside of the drive aisles as well. It's pretty simple from a land development standpoint. It was reviewed by the township engineer as well as the township traffic engineer. I think we resolved the comments. The major comments were zoning ones, which we just recently resolved by obtaining the necessary relief before the zoning hearing board a couple of weeks ago. I think that's a good short blurb, Ed, and we can probably proceed from there if you'd like, or if council has any questions.
Yeah, Russ, could you comment on the interconnect drive? You had given us option 1 and option 2. It's in our
Yeah,
packet.
And Greg, when I'm looking at this plan now, it looks like you went with option 1 as you installed an additional cross, a stop bar there, the stop sign that then causes vehicles to stop to allow people to cross on the diagonal to the sidewalk.
That's correct.
We had like those options. That's an acceptable option to us as far as addressing that pedestrian access in that area.
Okay, thank you.
So Russ, Greg, all of the items in Chapter C then under zoning, all of those variances have either been obtained or the plan's been revised to address all of those zoning issues?
Correct. Number 1 was for the use, and number 2 was for the overall parking. We received variances for both of those. And then number 3 was the options that Russ just discussed in terms of the pedestrian crossing.
Okay, then at this time, let me address Chapter D, which would be the land development, and you can let us know if you're going to comply with those or asking for
Sure.
a waiver. And that's the one,
Ed, may I just interrupt? There was one additional representative, Joe Tassone. Joe, if you could add him as well, please. I apologize. I forgot about
that's
him.
right. We got him, Joe?
Yep, it's coming in now.
Great. Thank you. Sorry, Ed. Go ahead,
Just got him.
please.
That's okay. We have the Bensalem Township Council certification block must be revised to include 3 signature lines. And
Yes, will comply.
And number 2 is the executive reciprocal access easement agreement between Echo Bensalem LLC and the Street Road Plaza LLC, dated April 17th, 2018, has been
Right.
included with this submission. And I guess you need to submit a copy to the township solicitor for his review.
Sure, that's a will comply.
And number 3 is the proposed force main connection must be approved by the Bucks County Water and Sewer Authority and the DEP. The response letter indicates that the applicant is in the process of obtaining the required approval.
And that's a will comply as well. I think we may have already gotten that approval. I'd have to look into it.
All right, so you either have gotten it or you're in the process of applying for it.
That's correct.
Greg, we do have that approval.
Right, that's Brian.
All
Yeah.
right, so you will comply, you have it. Who spoke when who was that?
That was Brian Myers, our project engineer.
Brian Myers, okay. And then we defer to traffic planning and design for the traffic and circulation issue. And of course, you will comply with that, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Good. Joe, did you want something? All right, and basically, the stormwater management is not an issue because you're not really adding any additional impervious surface. As you said, you're just reusing it.
Correct.
Okay, so in the summary, you're complying with everything. You received the variances that were required. Gentlemen, I'm going to give it to you at this time for any questions that you have.
Mr. Pizzo, can you elaborate on the history of this with, I know we've previously seen this, but haven't addressed this in terms of a change to the zoning ordinance, as it relates to, a previous court case, I believe it was in Plumstead in Bucks County.
This originally came to the council through the applicant as a sort of a which way would you rather we proceed? Would you, the township, rather they proceed with a text amendment to our zoning ordinance to make gas pumps an accessory use to supermarkets? Or would it be our preference that they go and get a use variance as well as the other necessary variances from the zoning ordinance? I believe it was the considered opinion of all of you that you weren't collectively of a mind right now to go ahead and make the change that was being proposed as a text amendment to the zoning ordinance, and in light of the fact that the applicant needed some dimensional variances to go along with the use variance, they went as requested and directed, went to the zoning hearing board and got the variances that were requested. Insofar as whether if pressed, the township would be forced to make gas pumps an accessory use to supermarkets in the 21st century, there is some case law out there that would suggest that the courts of this Commonwealth are starting to lean that way, and that gas pumps may be, at least in some quarters, considered to be accessories to the modern gas station. At this point in time, that question is not before you. You may collectively want to revisit in the future whether a change to our zoning ordinance is prudent and whether it's something we want to do before we have one essentially rammed down our throats. In this case, Echo did not ram it down your throats. They came in and asked you which way would you rather they proceed. They heard what you said, they went that route, and that's how we find ourselves here this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Pizzo.
Joe, that means that we have control over, it's not automatic that a supermarket will be able to put pumps in. Unless that happens in the future and we lose that control, then we lose that control. But for now, other supermarkets cannot automatically get gas pumps unless they come in front of us and ask for similar variances or whatever their particular situation is.
That is correct. Our ordinance at this point in time does not make gas pumps an accessory use by right to supermarkets.
Both of you are correct. However, in the long term, the best solution to this would be to change the ordinance itself. That would be the appropriate way of doing it, as opposed to everybody coming back for a use variance. Although, as Mr. Joe, as you had just said, both you Joes, I should have just said that we do have more control with it if it was a use variance. But the proper way is to have the ordinance change. That's my opinion.
I agree, Mr. Kisselback, and I think if we want to make sure that it's, done to our satisfaction as a governing body, then I think we should proactively address that.
Well, fortunately, ECHO gave us some language that we can work from, so that's something that we can recirculate to all of you and revisit. But again, for the moment, ECHO has taken the path that they've been asked to take. They've secured the necessary variances, so this particular bank of 8 gas pumps is permitted, at least from a zoning perspective. And the comments on your comment letter, I would suggest to you, are rather Spartan in nature. So the application is teed up and ready for your consideration.
Are there any other questions from our council members?
I was just curious too, it doesn't matter that much except for my curiosity, but anybody that's shopping, most people who use this gas pumps would be shopping in the giant shopping center at least. Do you have to have a membership card or a card with Giant to use it, or you just anybody can get gas there, and then you have a program where people who shop at Giant might get discounts? Is that how it's going to work?
Joe can answer that. Joe, please go ahead.
Yep, no membership is needed. Anyone from the public can use it. You just get extra points earned if you have a Giant card and use the fuel station.
Okay, so that's how it becomes used. Okay.
Gentlemen, your pleasure. There's no,
I have questions.
go ahead, Joe. Joe, you're
Mr.
on.
Edelman,
Yes, sir.
the road that you're going to be putting through the shopping center, is that going to be done at the same time that everything else is being done, so that road will be used right away?
Yes, absolutely.
And also, is there going to be signage pointing people in that direction? Because we have so many issues with people making left-hand turns out of the shopping center, whether it's a right turn only, and we have people making left turns in from Street Road. There's no entrance there. I just want to make sure that something like this isn't going to cause more problems with the traffic on Street Road. So we have proper signage showing people that exit is there, so they can use that, go out to a light and do it safely.
We can certainly add that. I don't believe we have specific signage, but we can make that subject to your engineer's review and approval.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Kisselback, I have a few questions myself. In terms of the plan, what is the purpose of the ice vending pad?
Which pad?
The vending pad. That's I believe that's closest to the storage tank. There's some type of ice or vending pad. I'm assuming the intention is to put some type of vending machine there.
Yeah, that Giant likes to have either an ice machine there or some type of vending, like you mentioned, for purchase for customers.
What are the operating hours of the store?
The fuel stations are usually from 6 a.m. to 10 or 11 p.m.
I'm still trying to understand what the purpose of someone needing a bag of chips there at the vending, whereas they could just go into the grocery store. I mean,
It's mostly for convenience, and usually it is bags of ice, so a customer can grab a bag of ice there and pay for it at the kiosk as opposed to going into the store. There's not much vending that goes out there at all. It's really more for convenience of customers who are just filling up and then want to exit right after that.
Okay. The employee kiosk, I'm assuming then will be staffed from that time, the gas pumps that are open from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Absolutely.
Question for Mr. Pizzo. Has the easement agreement been reviewed? As I noted on the letter, the T&M letter, it appears as if there is an easement agreement that's being drafted.
It has not as of yet, but that obviously, if council approves the application tonight, will be a condition of approval, and it'll be satisfactory in form and content, both to the township engineer and to my office.
Okay. Yeah, just to make the point about who's going to maintain that right away. I'm assuming that those terms will be spelled out in that agreement.
Ed, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have the obligation to maintain the cut through based on the terms of the easement agreement.
Great. Okay. Answers that question. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Just out of curiosity, I know when the Giant was originally approved way back years ago, there was some type of proposed expansion. Is that still being discussed or in the works?
It's still available, but I don't know if Joe wants to answer that question at this point. I'm not sure.
Yep, no. At
Go
this
ahead.
time, Giant doesn't have any plans to expand the store at the moment.
Okay. And then one other note to the hydrant on the plan. I noted was, well, the plan notes it was 261 feet, and correct me if I'm wrong. I think the code requires 275. So clearly it meets the code. However, are we concerned about the fact that the hydrant is so far away from the gas pumps? If something were to happen and we have, a fire truck go in there and have to run a hose clear across the other side of the parking lot, trying to get through cars, vehicles, and so forth, are we concerned about the location of that hydrant? And did you consider maybe installing another hydrant closer to those pumps? Or, I'm sorry, second to that question is there a hydrant that's closer to the store that we're not seeing?
Ryan, do you have the answers to those questions?
That is the closest hydrant to the store and to the gas pumps. Joe, maybe you could elaborate on the fire suppression system that's available for the gas pumps, because typically the use of a hydrant in that situation is not necessarily the key element in combating an issue at the gas pumps.
Yeah, I mean, just very briefly, there are several safety features on the fuel facility. I'll just name a few. I mean, if there's underneath the gas dispensers themselves, if there's any detection of a leak or issue there, the fuel dispensers will shut off, the fuel tanks will shut off, dispensing fuel to the dispensers. If accidentally a customer drives off while the hose is still in their car, attached to their car, there's an automatic shutoff valve at the dispenser itself that shuts the flow of gas. If accidentally a customer their vehicle would hit the dispenser, again, the cutoff and shutoff valves trigger. There's monitoring off-site, there's monitoring in the store, and monitoring at the corporate office for any type of leak or disaster. The kiosk attendant also has an automatic shutoff valve available to shut all flow to fuel to any of the dispensers and the lines underneath the facility. So with several features there in place, it would most likely avoid any type of major fire that maybe you're referring to in that instance.
Okay. Yeah, and I recognize that some of it may be required with foam, but I at least still want to ask the question as far as the location of that hydrant.
Yeah, and I do want to point out the fire department did review the plan and they did comment on that it was acceptable to them.
I did see that. Thank you.
I believe there's hydrants out on Street Road too, up in that area that can be used coming down because they're so close to Street Road.
Yeah, good point. Thanks, Joe. I think that covers it, Mr. Kisbeck. Thank you very much.
Ed,
Okay,
I have one more question, Ed.
Joe?
Mr. Pizzo, I want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. They have to have that agreement for that cross easement into the other center and being able to use before they can build the station or open the station or do anything, because that's one of the main concerns that, having that traffic safety. Am I correct? Am I reading it correctly?
You are correct, and I'll take it one better, Mr. Polari, in that the cross easement agreement is something that'll have to be reviewed and approved by the township and will be recorded in Doylestown contemporaneously with the recording of the record plan. So that should all be put to bed before we even get a record plan recorded in Doylestown.
Thank you, Joe.
Sure.
And I have just a very minor question relative to the kiosks and the vending aspect of the pumps themselves. Can a customer pay with credit card and/or cash? And how would that be accomplished?
Yes, credit card or cash at the kiosk.
At the kiosk, okay, thank you.
I have one more question.
Go ahead.
I noticed that there was no assessment from the impact committee. And I did notice that Mr. Tavani's traffic study did note that there would be a small increase in trips. I think it's 39 trips, but that would be applicable to an impact fee. Wondering how we can determine what that would be and make sure that we're addressing that properly.
Then you would agree, is that, Greg, you would agree that whatever the assessment would be from the impact fee committee, that you would agree to make that payment, is that correct?
That's correct. We have estimated at 39 new trips to which the impact fee would apply, and we'd pay that as a condition of the approval.
Okay, so that would be part of the motion.
And that is covered by item 4 of the engineer's letter, which references the TPD letter, which references that an impact fee will be necessary. So I don't know that the impact fee committee, because of COVID, has had an opportunity to meet and conclude what that fee actually is, but it is provided for in the approval that an impact fee will be called for and it will be paid. But belt and suspenders, we now have that as part of the discussion as well.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have one other issue. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right.
In the vending area, there's no chance that there's going to be propane sold or done at that area, is there? Can we make that a part of the, whoever makes the motion, make that part of the motion? Because if it's only open certain hours, that would be sitting out there in that area wide open with no protection.
There's no propane tanks or pumps on the plans.
Right.
But the vending area, that could be a vending situation because they have a lot of different places now have little places where they have filled propane bottles that somebody can come in and swap one for. I want to make sure that's not going to be at that site.
No, and it won't be, Mr. Polari. I think your ordinance actually has some regulations on what can be near a gas pump or gas dispensing facility, so we'd comply with those regulations, obviously.
All right, if you feel comfortable making that part of a motion, whoever does that, that'd be fine also. Gentlemen, your pleasure.
I'll make the motion that we accept and approve the application submitted to us under tax parcel 0203706060-1, 60-2, 60-3. That approval is going to include will complies under the T&M letter number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, and number 6. That also includes the review and approval of the cross easement agreement by our solicitor, Mr. Pizzo. If there's any issues, that's to be kicked back to council. The approval is also going to include as Mr. Polari had requested, the connection being constructed at the same time of the gas pump installation, in addition to the directional signs being installed around that area to ensure vehicle traffic, making sure that the vehicle traffic is goes in the same direction. And the approval also includes the fact that the applicant has agreed to the impact fee as calculated by our Impact Fee Advisory Board. If we wanted to also include in that motion with the fact that the vending area would, we would not allow any propane tanks to be sold and or exchanged there in that vending area.
I'll second the motion.
All right, you second the motion. First, we have a second on the motion, and that, of course, was based on the April 16th letter memorandum from T&M. Is that right, Eddie?
That's correct, yep.
Okay, first, we have a second on the motion. Any additional discussion? Not hearing any. All those in favor signify with an aye. Aye.
Vote aye.
Any against? Any abstentions? Unanimous.
Great. Thank you very much, everyone. I
Thank you,
appreciate your
gentlemen.
time this evening. Please stay well.
And you and your staff also.
Thank you very much. Take care.
All right, if everyone on council would give me a second, I'll clean up the board here.
Number 7.
And I'll bring in the attorney, Richard DeMarco, who is the counsel for item number 7.
Okay, agenda item number 7 is a consideration. This is of a minor subdivision. The applicant is AV Hotels. This is a 1329 Bristol Pike, and the proposed use is a mixed use. This is a PCD, Planned Commercial Park District. The tax map parcel is 2-30-108. Okay, Mr. DeMarco, is that correct? Am I saying that correctly? Is it right, Joe?
Yes.
DeMarco? Okay. Would you like to introduce yourself and explain to us in a general term what you would like to do?
Yeah, of course. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, good. All right, thank you. Yes, we're here for approval of a minor subdivision. We had, back in February, received variances for the subdivision from the Bensalem Township Zoning Hearing Board. We did the required notices prior to the hearing. There were no neighbors in attendance. We received the variances. What we are, just to summarize briefly what we're doing, that it's just a subdivision of an existing lot which contains the Holiday Inn Express Hotel and the Bob Evans Restaurant. And the subdivision is very simple. There's no new construction, no work proposed. It's just to subdivide the restaurant lot and its parking from the hotel lot. And again, no construction proposed, no opposition, and really that's it. Obviously, the COVID-19 crisis happened, and we've been waiting for that to subside so we could go to your council for final approval. There were some conditions on the decision. I followed up with Mr. Farrell, and Mr. Farrell agrees that his conditions were met, and very simply, we're here for final approval. There were concerns about the notice for this meeting. I did forward proof of that to Mr. Pizzo. Mr. Pizzo and I discussed it today. We got very late notice of this meeting. I know you were grappling with how to hold this meeting in light of these very unusual circumstances. We acted as quickly as we could when we found out that you were going to try to have this tonight in a Zoom format. And we can say that the notices of this meeting and under this platform were delivered to the residents. And again, these are the same residents that received notice of the zoning hearing board. We had no concerns and no opposition. So we did get those notices out, and they were received prior to the meeting today, but it was very recent. It was in the last several days.
Now, when you say the notices were given out, They weren't mailed registered receipt, is that correct?
That's correct. We felt that they would not be received by today. So we had them both hand-delivered and overnight mail, FedEx overnight mail, to ensure that they would be received prior to noon today. And the tracking numbers indicate that that was done. I understand it's very short notice. I would just ask, since we acted as soon as we found out that you were going to try to hold this today, we at least complied with the spirit of the requirement, if not the strict letter. And everybody did get it. And again, no one was opposed to the variances at the hearing. So I'm hoping that you'll let us go forward. Look, if it's too much of a concern for you and other members of the council, we understand. I would only say this: the applicant has been delayed by the COVID-19 crisis. He is going to sell the property to another buyer. The buyer's been waiting patiently, so anything you can do to move it along, it would be greatly appreciated. And we can do your next meeting, but if there's any way to see to it to do it tonight, we would be greatly appreciative.
So you're saying the reason that you're because I was wondering why you want this property subdivided is because you have your property up for sale?
No.
No.
The applicant is the owner of the hotel and is going to remain the owner of the hotel and the operator of the hotel. He is subdividing the restaurant property and selling the restaurant. There'll be no change in the restaurant. The restaurant will assume the same lease and will continue to operate. But there were tax considerations involved. There was a difficulty in the hotel organization managing the restaurant. They're not in the restaurant business. They don't want to manage the restaurant. There were issues about the allocation of the tax. And it was decided that it would be far more efficient for the restaurant to have its own tax parcel because they couldn't figure out how to divide the tax liability, the property taxes. So that was one of the main reasons. And again, the hotel owner does not want to manage the restaurant. They're not in the restaurant business. And that was discussed at the zoning hearing board. But the owner will continue to be the owner of the hotel and manage the hotel. And of course, there's a cross easement. That was a condition of the zoning hearing board decision. That's on our plan. The cross-hatched area is the easement area, and that will be done and recorded, and there's no problem with that, obviously, and we agreed to that condition.
All right,
I hope that
gentlemen.
answers your question.
Gentlemen? Does anybody have any questions?
I guess first, Mr. Pizzo, can you confirm with us whether or not you've reviewed these notices, whether or not it's acceptable with hand delivery or overnight without receiving a good confirmation that they've been delivered?
Well, we certainly live in unusual times, so let me start with that. Your ordinance requires, for a hearing such as this, 7 days prior notice mailed to adjacent property owners within a certain distance. I think it's 400 feet, Russ, of the property. It does not require advertisement in the newspaper, nor does the municipality's planning code. And so up until the point in time that an agenda gets printed, other than the neighboring property owners, no one else is typically aware that a hearing's coming in. In this case, because we are operating in a virtual format pursuant to the act of the state legislature that is allowing us to do it, notice of this hearing was advertised in the Bucks County Courier-Times in the legal notice section of the newspaper, as well as the prior hearing as well, which is notice to the entire community and something that routinely isn't done. The applicant in this case has provided us with a verification that the notices were either hand-delivered or sent by overnight mail as represented by Mr. DeMarco to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 property owners who are entitled to receive this notice pursuant to our statute. The hand deliveries were effectuated either on Friday, June 19, or Saturday, June 20, which in all candor would be about the same time the registered mail would have been arriving at those houses. We don't require overnight delivery. The overnight delivery, based on the tracking receipts that were provided by Mr. DeMarco earlier today, indicate that all of them were delivered. The overnight deliveries, however, are all pretty much universally deliveries that were made today at various times during the day. Largely in the morning, it looks like a morning delivery was requested.
Fair enough, that's fine. So are you, as long as you're comfortable with it and we won't fall into any legal issue, I'm okay with it.
There is always the possibility, and to some extent, this property owner, to the extent they're asking us to do it, are proceeding at their own peril. If we were not in the middle of a COVID, if we were not otherwise operating under a slightly revised set of rules, I would be counseling you, as I always counsel you, you can't hear it tonight. Because this has been advertised to the public in a way that we usually don't require, but the law has allowed us to do it. While the letter of our ordinance hasn't been satisfied, the requirements of the state law have. So it's really what all of you, or a majority of you, are comfortable with doing tonight, in terms of whether we proceed tonight or whether we table this for 2 weeks and tee it up again. But that's where we find ourselves. I think at this point, if you're comfortable proceeding as a group, I don't have any, I'm not sitting here saying, no, you can't do it. On the other hand, if you're all, a majority of you are comfortable saying, just as soon, you know, I realize it's been 3 months, AV hotels, 2 more weeks isn't going to, you know, well, at least we hope 2 more weeks isn't going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back, and we'll see you after those notices are well, at this point, the notices have been mailed out. It's just that we now need to allow an additional 7 days to pass. So, whatever way all of you are comfortable.
Is your applicant agreeable? I know there was agreements made with the surrounding property owners relative to stormwater management. Are you aware of any of those agreements? And are you going to adhere to those? Am I right on that, Joe?
I'm not personally aware of that, except to say that, of course, if there's agreements, this is the first time that was raised to me. Obviously, any stormwater management would have to comply with any of that, and of course we're amenable. Of course we'll comply with that. And I agree with Joe's summary, and I would not push. I would say this to the council members. First of all, I greatly appreciate you placing me on the agenda today. And I understand it's an ask, quote unquote. But I wouldn't ask you to do it if I didn't feel there was any controversy. We only have 6 addressees. 3 of them are neighbors in the same development, and there's no proposed construction, no proposed changing of anything, and the property will remain physically the same. So I feel that there's no controversy and that there's no real level of risk in approving this. I believe we would have there was plenty of notice for the zoning hearing board, and there was no opposition. I would imagine if there was a concern about this, we would have known. So that is why I've asked to try to go forward today. And I certainly agree that we can wait another 3 weeks. I would only say that the client tried very hard. The minute we found out you were moving forward today, at the end of last week, we immediately set out to provide the notice, even though it does not meet the specific letter of the law. We believe it meets the spirit of the law.
And so you would be in agreement to adhere to any other previous
Oh, yes.
contracts or agreements regarding stormwater management and
Yes, sir.
obligations on your property owner.
Yes.
Mr. DeMarco, I've got my biggest concerns are the amount of missing information that we have in front of us. And I wonder if by postponing this to our next meeting, maybe that will give you time to get the relevant information and bring that, back to us that we can look at. And as I'm looking through the notes that have been provided to me, I see we're missing parking calculations. We know that cross easement agreement has not even been written yet. I have serious concerns about stormwater management issues. If the property is divided, but it was one stormwater management system that was designed to accommodate both properties, how is that going to be addressed in the future, especially once one property is sold off? So there's a great deal of discussion I think we need to have on these topics. And I wonder if maybe by postponing this, it'll give you a little bit more time to prepare for that discussion.
I was unaware of any missing information. I do agree with you that the easement agreement hasn't been enacted yet. It's hard to enter into the easement agreement without approval of the subdivision. The recording and drafting of the easement agreement would have to follow this council's approval. We don't have a subdivision. It's a moot issue to do the easement prior to your decision granting because there's currently concurrent ownership. So there's no easement with a single owner. Once the property is subdivided, we do the easement, and we'll certainly, we've already agreed to that condition, and we'll do that.
Well, but there is, as we talked about, there is an existing easement already that we've addressed in the not too distant past with the neighboring property and your property. And I believe that is what our main concern is, of how that's going to be addressed, any responsibilities of how that will be split up between the two properties. We don't even have a framework, it sounds like, because you're not even aware that other easement exists.
An easement running through our property to another property, you mean?
I believe it's specific to the stormwater management system that addresses the entire area.
Well, I would only say this. Again, this is the first time stormwater management was brought up, but we would take if there's a subdivision that occurs, it does not cancel any existing obligations, and whoever were to take title to the subdivided property would be bound by the current lease, any utility agreements, any easement agreements. They would all take subject to existing regulations. The subdivision is not going to prevent the stormwater management of the site in any way, I don't think. But look, if you're looking for additional information, I'm happy to provide that. I was unaware that you wanted it. It was not a condition of the zoning board decision.
Understood. But it is something that was a very large issue when we addressed some expansion of development on the neighboring property. And it came up to joint responsibility for some of the stormwater management systems in the area, including swales and retention basins and who would maintain them. We haven't seen the text of that, I don't believe. Gentlemen, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that we as council members have seen the text of that agreement. And so I can't right now begin to comprehend how this subdivision might affect the execution of that agreement. Between, once one property gets sold off, who has responsibility? Now, is that shared just between the hotel and the neighboring property, or is it shared between all three property owners? So these are the things that are concerned to me, and that I think we need to pursue a little bit further before we can go ahead and, have the full hearing on this issue.
How adversely would this affect you, Mr. DeMarco, if it were pushed back by 2 weeks? As Mr. Pizzo said, 3 months in the making, an extra 2 weeks in the oven can't be that bad.
Yeah, I understand. We'll deal with it, of course.
Hey, Mr. DeMarco, I had one question before it looks like you're going to be going, so I had one question. But My question is, I think what people are trying to get at is there's an association down there between all the different people that are in that complex. Okay, so whether there's a Verizon building, there's the hotel, there's different things. As an association, they have responsibilities for drainage and things that the association has to take care of, and people contribute money to. How does this affect the hotel and the restaurant together were in that association? The fact that they're dividing, how does that affect their responsibilities towards the whole association, the whole development? I think that's the core of it.
Okay, I understand.
Do you know that or no?
No, this is the first time it's come up just now.
Yeah, because there's an agreement between everybody down there to contribute to mostly stormwater management, but other things too, to take care of different areas down there. Now, I think that the Holiday Inn and the restaurant together contributed to that because they're one unit, but when they're separated, I don't think it eliminates the restaurant's responsibility towards the whole.
I have a general feeling as how we're going, if I may interrupt you. Gentlemen, are you interested? Bingo. Wow, and they told me I couldn't sing. At any rate, I'm going to suggest that we put a motion on the floor to table this, and I'm going to ask one of our members if they're interested in doing that at this time. This would be appropriate time.
Ed, can I ask a question first?
Sure you can.
Mr. Pizzo, they understand that this is part of that whole PCD development, right? They're not trying to subdivide this outside of that development. That can't be done. So anything that's done throughout the whole development with stormwater, with safety issues, all the things that go on, they have to still comply with all that, correct?
I believe that is what Mr. DeMarco was saying, that their ultimate goal here is to simply change the ownership of the restaurant. The lessee, Bob Evans, would remain in place, and that all other aspects, all of the other intermingled relationships would stay intact. Now, obviously, that's going to need to be accomplished by whatever documents will be, as is being discussed right now, in the way of cross easements, and also it sounds as if a revision or an amendment to the operating agreement among and between the various property owners down there. Mr. DeMarco obviously isn't aware of the fact that when Bensalem 21 came in for its land development, there were a number of stormwater issues that were addressed at that time. And I believe, as Mr. Sloan was saying, the council would like to hear that those issues have been addressed, or that somehow something isn't going to get lost in the cracks, as we now, AV will still be a part of the equation, but perhaps someone who's supposed to contribute, who's going to be standing at least partially in AV's shoes. Township wants to see all of those documents and make sure that we're comfortable that the shared obligations of all of the property owners of that site remain intact, and that to the extent that all are equally responsible to make sure that things like maintenance, and particularly the operation of the stormwater management system, remain intact. The council wants to make sure that there's not going to be any impairment to that existing arrangement.
Thank you, Mr. Pizzo.
Yeah.
I agree with that also, but and I think that should come in front of us with this whole package here, because we're the ones that are going to end up putting up with the issues if stormwater isn't done, if the easements aren't correct, if the tax parcels aren't correct. It's all going to come down to us, which should be done now and be done right.
Gentlemen, your pleasure.
I'll make a motion that we table agenda item 7, the minor subdivision for AV hotels, to a date certain of July 13th, our next meeting.
I'll second it.
All right, motion on the floor. We have a second on the motion. All those in favor signify.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Kisbach, real quick, one other quick comment. Just a reminder about the parking. I think we need to make sure that we.
Wait a minute. I have a motion on the floor. We're first and second. Let's vote for the motion. There's no discussion on the table motion, so let's vote on the motion. All those in
Okay.
favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? Any abstentions? Unanimous. Ed, you're on.
Yeah, just to make a note about the fact that, question in terms of parking, whether or not the parking was going to meet code once we subdivided.
Yeah, I can address that. Mr. Farrell and I spoke about that. The belief was that he was able to find, and you can confer with him on this as well. The original plan, he found the original plan, and the original plan it met code when constructed. The restaurant piece will not, under your current code provisions, will be short. But Mr. Farrell and I went over it together. He agreed that it was legal when constructed, thereby that by the way, the reality on the ground is that there's plenty of parking there anyway. You don't have to take my word for that. Anyway, bottom line is, Mr. Farrell agreed with me that the current code requirements were not the same as when the property was constructed, and that it fully met code when it was built. And again, no physical change to either structure. They all have the same amount of floor area, the same amount of rooms, and he agreed that it's a non-conforming condition that should remain.
But it would be a non-conforming condition on a brand-new tax parcel.
Mr. Pizzo, can
I
you
think
weigh
that
in
is
on that?
correct.
Will they need a zoning variance for that? Or a waiver?
I don't know.
Okay, all right.
I mean, I would, Mr. Forgive me, I'm not being able to pronounce your last name. I believe that that no variance is necessary because it's legal when constructed. Thereby, it's a pre-existing non-conforming condition.
Mr. DeMarco, I appreciate your opinion. However, again, it's a concern, and I want to just raise it now at this point. So in case it comes up at the next meeting, I'm going to have the same question and whether or not we need to have a waiver to that item.
Well, we,
Gotcha.
obviously, and when I say I don't know because your zoning officer has apparently already weighed in on the question, and I don't think it's within my purview to sit here and, in a matter I haven't discussed with him, give you an opinion as to what can or can't happen. If Mr. Farrell, in his capacity as the zoning officer, has looked at this and said what's going to happen is okay, and again, I haven't discussed it with him at all, so I don't know on what basis he would have rendered any opinion, but we'll look at it and we'll make sure we know the answer for the next hearing.
That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Pizzo, can you make sure that we have a copy of the cross easements for the whole complex so we can, I think that'll end a lot of the problems. Because there should be a cross-reference, cross easement agreement for the whole plot.
Russ, did you hear all that? Because you'll be down in building and planning tomorrow morning and ask the appropriate people to start to pull those documents.
Yeah, I'll do that, and then B, going back to Ed's question, I know that Ken put a fairly lengthy email explaining the parking requirements. He can share that with you, Joe, and the rest of council. I think it'll clear up a lot of questions about the parking issue too.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
And thank you for your time. May I ask just for a copy of that stormwater management agreement? If someone is getting that tomorrow, if it could be emailed to me, that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Russ, you have that?
Yep, I'm going to email. I'm not there tomorrow, but I'll communicate tonight with Ken to make sure we start digging for those documents and then get that out to everybody.
Okay, well said. Thank you very much, Mr. DeMarco. Good luck. Welcome to
Thank you for your
Bensalem.
time. Everybody be well and stay safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You're
Thank you. Take care.
You're a gentleman. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to agenda item number 8, request a waiver. This is for curbs and sidewalks installation. This is for, of course, is subject to payment and fee in lieu of. And this applicant is Mr. Pooks, 2430 Paris Avenue. Pookies? 2-7-72. And I guess, Mr. Pazza, you want to comment on this, or?
This would be
Russ?
We'll give Russ a turn.
Russ, it's about time you said something. Come on.
Yeah, Quentin looked at this, and I think Quentin is on the line if you want to cue him in, Joe, to see if he has anything to add. But there are no curbs or sidewalks in this area, and Quentin recommended that council consider the fee in lieu of the curbs and sidewalk, and the fee amount would be for $1,700.
$1,700, that's the fee? Okay?
Correct.
All right, gentlemen, you have any questions on this? It looks pretty cut and dry.
Are they doing construction on this lot? Is this a new construction?
Yeah, it's a house, flat house. One house.
One house being constructed on the lot. Okay.
It's curbs and sidewalks. If they
I know there's none in that neighborhood, so more of that.
it would cause problems for everybody else.
Mr. President, I'll make a motion that we approve the request as presented, and they give us the fee in lieu of as presented by Mr. Benner.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion on the floor, second motion. All those in favor signify with an aye.
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 Any noes? Any abstentions? All those that's unanimous. Okay, thank you very much. Quentin, how are you?
Muted.
Oh. All right, well,
I'm here.
all right, glad to see you. All right, gentlemen, I'm going to go to Mr. Pizzo. Have we had any emails for public comment?
So, a couple things. First, just a few things, Mr. Kisselback. First, the minutes should reflect, and I apologize, we didn't mention after the lengthy discussion on the public notices for the AV Hotel, the record should reflect that notices for the Echo Bensalem were provided to the township in advance of the hearing, and they are all in order. The record should also reflect that there was no public comment from the public. I'm not sure if we did that or not, but in the event we didn't, there was no public comment received during the hearing on the Echo Bensalem. And up to this point, we have received no public comment. So if we are at the public comment on non-agenda item portion of the meeting, there is no public comment at this time, Mr. Kisselwack.
Thank you, Joseph. All right, gentlemen, let's go round robin. What do you think? We'll take it from the top left and just follow through. We have Joe Knowles. Would you like to make any comments for this evening before we conclude the meeting?
No, I just thank everybody's efforts for being here, and I think for what we're up against, we're doing a good job here of getting everything done that needs to be done, and looking forward to being in council chambers as soon as we go to the green. So that's all I have.
Hopefully next meeting. We'll take Joe Polari, Vice President.
I agree with Mr. Knowles, and I'd also like to say I'm disappointed that we have no sports going anywhere. None of these people can agree with anything. Takes away, we need some sports out there and some things happening.
Thank you, Joe. Jesse Sloan, Councilman.
Thank you, Mr. Kisselback. I was hoping that now we could get an update on some of the issues that were brought up in public comment at the last meeting.
Shoot. So
Well, let's see. The first one was Joe Connolly at 568 Bristol Pike. Has been ongoing, but I believe they were supposed to be in court last week or this week. I'm not sure.
That was actually
anything on that, Mr. Pizzo.
I know that there was a hearing. Quentin, I don't know if you know what the outcome of the hearing was?
Yes, they had a hearing today, which was continued for at least 60 days, possibly only 30. Mr. Connolly has a new attorney who requested the extension, but building planning has not gotten an extension, new court date for that hearing yet.
Okay. The other would be Fisher's Restaurant, the concrete paving issue. Do we have an update on that, Quentin?
Yes, so myself and Ken Farrell from building planning met with the owners. They submitted plans late last week. We have not yet done a full review. PennDOT is also involved and had an inspector out a few weeks ago after your direction. I know that their office is looking into that, and there's going to be some issues on their end as well.
And so at this point, just being reviewed by the township and PennDOT.
Township and PennDOT.
Okay. And I believe the other was, I believe you were given the horrible task of looking at every single curb in the Eddington neighborhood.
Yes. So I'm help with that as well.
Good.
There's, from what I remember, there's 119 locations we're looking at.
Okay.
So
Okay.
the other inspector and myself are trying to get an easy memo to prepare. We got everything correlated with pictures and numbers, so we're thinking about not putting all the pictures into the actual memo to the council.
Sure.
We're hoping to get that done either late this week, early next week, so you'll have it for the next meeting.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you. That's actually way earlier than I thought it would take you, so I really do appreciate that. Okay, so those were my questions. My only other comments would be, I just want to congratulate all of the graduates this year. The high school had a wonderful graduation ceremony over at Parks last week. I was very excited to be able to attend and witness everybody. So congratulations and good luck to them, all the graduates. I believe they have a very bright future from what we saw. And the other thing I would say is that, we're slotted to go into the green phase on Friday. I'm very excited about that. I do want to say kudos to all the Bensalem businesses and residents that have helped us get this to the state. I know it's been tough. I know it's been challenging, but information that came out of the governor's office last week showed how well we've all been doing. Pennsylvania is one of only 3 states, according to the CDC, that has showed a continued decrease in the number of COVID cases over a span of at least 42 days. That's pretty significant considering the other 2 states were Hawaii, which is isolated, and Montana, which is not in a heavily populated area. So we're the only state in the northeast region of the U.S. that can boast that stat, and I'm very proud of all of the Bensalem residents and the businesses that helped make that possible. So continue the hard work, and we will get through this together. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Ed Turkmejian, Councilman. Ed?
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Kisselbeck. First and foremost, I wanted to take a quick minute just to thank the NAACP for putting together a well-organized rally on June 9th over in Laconia Park, and want to thank our police department for being visible and participating, which I think was really important. Speaking about our police department, I also wanted to send thanks out to those guys for assisting with putting together the high school graduation. Several of us were there. Councilman Sloan, Knowles, and I were there. Really got to see the excitement of all of our graduating students who were really the only school in the county to have the opportunity to walk this year. So it was a really great event. I also wanted to reiterate some of what the other council members had said in terms of thanking those at the Township Building for putting together Zoom calls. I am definitely looking forward to getting back into the council chambers next month and having our normal traditional meetings. I also wanted to just reiterate Councilman Sloan's point about the importance of following CDC guidelines. I know we'll be moving to green next week, which is extremely exciting, but it's important that we continue to follow those guidelines as set by the state and the CDC. And again, our state has shown great progress in comparison to the recent spikes that we're seeing across a number of different states. So it'd be great to continue those low numbers. And last but not least, I hear that it's someone's birthday today. So I wanted to send out a happy birthday to Councilman Kisselbeck.
Wow.
Hey,
I didn't know.
happy birthday,
I
Kisselbeck.
didn't know that.
Birthday.
How do you know that, Edward?
Well,
As a child, birthday party
I have my connections, Edward.
Okay.
Yep.
All right,
Use
thanks.
that
I think council should sing happy birthday to it.
Thank you, gentlemen.
and had big wild birthday parties across the street, right?
Dedicated to the township. Here I am on my birthday. I know what you're saying. Thanks, Ed.
Yep.
Mr. Mayor?
Well, certainly echo a lot of the things that council said, and I think Bensalem has acted as it should have through all this pandemic as it continues. And as we go into green, the township building will be open on Monday. So we're asking people to continue to wear a mask in here, and they'll be coming in and be able to go to all of the departments, and we'll be able to arrange meetings wherever they need to be arranged for everybody. So we're looking forward to the public having access to it. And again, to the graduates, having that opportunity. I'm a team guy. I talk about teams and what a team was put together there with everyone involved between our police, the high school, and the students, how they conducted themselves. So we have to give a little shout out to the casino also. They allowed this to happen, and they cooperate so much with us. So it's been a great effort on that. I think that our kids had an opportunity a lot didn't have across this state. So that was a great thing. So we're looking forward to seeing the public again. We're looking forward to getting off of Zoom and get to see everybody and be able to look at each other and say hi once and for all. This has it's been crazy, guys. And hopefully we don't spike and get ourselves in trouble again. So everybody just abide by what we're trying to do here and succeed. So looking forward to seeing council in person next meeting. So to everybody else, God bless.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Russ, how about if you make a comment or two if you like?
No comments tonight. Just wishing everybody a happy 4th of July that's coming up. And nothing else to report on.
All right, thank you. Quentin, would you like to say something?
I'm just joining the meeting, so I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Pazzo?
The minutes should reflect that the council met in executive session back on Thursday, June 11, for approximately an hour to 90 minutes. Present for the executive session were the 5 members of council, Mayor DiGirolamo, Bill Samori, and me. The topic discussed was a matter of real estate and potential litigation. No official action was taken during that executive session, and none is required this evening as a result. Other than that, just look forward to not having to try and quarterback this Zoom meeting ever again.
Great,
So look forward to seeing you all in a couple weeks, and happy 4th of July to everyone.
Thank you, and I'll end by just saying these are peculiar times with the protests and the pandemic. We are living times that we hopefully will never have to repeat again. And I think that on the state level, we've done a wonderful job. Congratulations to the governor and keeping that going. Special congratulations to Mayor DiGirolamo and his administration in terms of just keeping things sane in Bensalem. I've talked to him quite a bit, and I'm sure our other council members have too. And worrying about our residents is his number one priority, has always been his number one priority. And I'm sure he's as disappointed as all of us are as we look at the summer months and having to eliminate the summer program and the amphitheater, entertainment, and things that we like to do just for our residents and such. But the most important thing is we are here, we're moving along, and in a short time, we'll be back to normal. Hopefully, for the rest of the year, if not for the decades and the millenniums to come. And God bless everyone. 4th of July is coming up. Make that a special day that you remember what America is about and the independence that we all share in America. And I would just say, end it by saying, God bless America. Have a good night. That's it, gentlemen.
All right, happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, young man.
Birthday.